All right, so today we have Chad Bloom from the National Buffalo Foundation joining us. He is here to talk a little bit about what the foundation is, what they do, and kind of what his work entails. My name is Rebecca Pierce. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at the Bison Center in Jamestown, North Dakota. So we're going to kick things right off, Chad, and if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to be on here today, talk about the National Buffalo Foundation. Um, Also, thanks to you guys for all the great work that the Discovery Center is doing to promote this amazing animal, our national mammal. So, really awesome. Just a bit about me. I live in West Central Minnesota, about 2 hours straight west of Minneapolis, 2 hours from the South Dakota border. Um, we just live in a small rural community. My wife and I got 3 bird dogs that I love to take upland hunting. So yeah, I think we've worked hard to build a life you don't need a vacation from. So our deal is living where we can make that happen. I've spent probably 15 years in the nonprofit space with 2 other conservation groups. And then I had a brief pull off with a large co-op out of Iowa working on their sustainability and data programs. So I've had a lot of experience though in that nonprofit. Most of it spent fundraising and working with corporate partners and foundations. So when this opportunity with the National Buffalo Foundation became available to me, it was a good fit. And I think people that are passionate about, animals, whether that's ducks, deer, pheasants, grouse, whatever, are a special breed of people. They're connected to not only the animal, but the landscape. And that makes for really unique, I think, and powerful conversation. So that's just a little bit about me and my pathway to the National Buffalo Foundation.
Great, thank you so much. If somebody's listening to this is their first time hearing about the National Buffalo Foundation. What is the organization? What do you guys do? What's the mission?
Great question. So 30 years of history, give or take, and the primary objective is to raise funds that fund a competitive grant process through the Bison Center of Excellence housed at South Dakota State. We also support some education initiatives. We have the Bison exhibit that travels around from location to location, so a lot of people can be exposed to it and get a chance to experience it. And then we have the Buffalo Hall of Fame with people that have contributed in significant ways to the great conservation story that buffalo bison are. So for us, it's working with donors, individual donors. It's working with corporate partners. We call it the National Buffalo Foundation Corporate Alliance. And then we have an initiative where we're raising funds through private foundations. So those are our 3 ways that we try to raise money for the important mission of research. And that research is, going to help sort of rise the tide for all things buffalo, right? And it's a broad cross section from, bison herd health and sustainability to cultural impact to nutrition. So it's a wide range of topics that are independently selected by a board, by a different group that look at all the applicants and select the best of the best for us to fund. And that ultimately trickles down to producers and processors and the whole downstream flow of that bison pipeline. Are you with me? Looks like we froze.
But we're
I'm
back.
back. Yeah, I don't know if I froze or you froze.
It could have been either one of us, to be totally honest with you. But I think I caught most of that. So thank you for that great answer. And I'll give a little bit of a disclaimer here. When I'm asking you these questions, there might be a little bit of overlap between, like what you may have said before, but I just want to make sure if there's any meat left on the bone for a question, I give you the full opportunity to answer it. So forgive me if I'm being a little redundant.
No, I love it. I mean, that way at least we cover it, right?
Exactly. Just repetition is king, right?
No stone left unturned.
Exactly. So I'm wondering if you can give me a little more history of the foundation. So, how did it get started? What is like the origin story? And was there a certain need or a problem or an issue that it was created to address?
It's a long, 30 years ago is a long time. I've been here 4 months. So the history lesson I'm going to be able to give about the foundation is not as comprehensive probably as it was a merger of two different organizations, and gosh, forgive me if I'm sort of gonna fumble my way through this, but there is a need. There's the National Bison Association, which is an awesome collective, does a lot of the present here and now things for bison producers. They're campaigning in DC. They're working on behalf of producers everywhere, and an unbelievably necessary organization. The National Buffalo Foundation has got a little different focus, I'd say, and equally as important about how can there's so much that's unknown about bison, right? Their bison herd health, all these things that are not exactly transferable from beef, cattle, but a unique critter on its own. So there is that huge research need and this opportunity for, essentially for showcasing, lifting up these animals, finding out what needs to be done. So the foundation as a fundraising arm can do a lot. So that's, without going into the specifics of how the two organizations merged, and I'm not going to be very well versed on that, but 30 years of essentially working with, in the industry with the general public, and working to expand the financial resources that are going to use to foster their future, that we're going to use to foster their future. So it's got that niche where we can work with individuals, corporations, and foundations on funding to lift the opportunity for bison in the United States.
When we talk about their future and opportunity, and even really things like, a lot of people automatically assume that means numbers, like just increasing population numbers. And maybe that is what it means. But what's your perspective on that? What does bison conservation mean to the National Buffalo Foundation and to you? Maybe even just beyond having more bison on the landscape.
Well, the first thing I'd say is connectivity, right? Like, yes, more bison on the landscape. I think the herd national numbers around 300,000 head, right? But along with that, what we'd like to see is more people engaged in that stewardship of bison, understanding that these are the original habitat management tools out there on the landscape, that there is this connective piece that goes from the whole ecosystem, that goes from the land to the animal to water to food, and then the cycle that replenishes. So for me, it's about, with a strong background in conservation, it's about the function of these animals in that ecosystem. And I think, quite honestly, nature has probably the best way to do things, right? And so they play that part to perfection. They are, like I said, they are the original conservation tool, that and fire, basically. So that soil disturbance, that grazing, the movement across the landscape where it isn't, taken down to bare earth, but yet move through the ecosystem to get different impact on the ground is absolutely mission critical to habitat, right? Conservation is a bigger term. Like, these were near extinct species, in the 1800s. And I think it's such a conservation success story to see these animals out on the landscape. I mean, in the places we get to reach them, for the public are, Custer, Yellowstone, and others that are just absolutely breathtaking, and to some degree a time machine, a way to travel back in time and see this portion of history as it's intended to be, I think. So does that kind of get to your question about, where do we, the National Buffalo Foundation, see that is, we see animals being a necessity on the landscape for management. We see them as a really awesome, viable opportunity for healthy, clean, nutritious food, right? We understand that they're a cultural icon to many different, populations in our country, and worthy of that absolute iconic status that they maintain. And, just the fact that we have the ability to impact, through financial contributions of our supporters, to kind of carry that message forward, knowing that your contribution, whether that's from an individual, from a foundation, or from a corporate alliance member, is going to ultimately elevate the things that we're all super connected to on these animals.
So I think that kind of bridges really naturally into another question I had for you, which was, you support research and education through grants and other types of funding. So what kinds of projects, I'm wondering if you can speak specifically to some projects that the foundation has helped make possible.
Yeah, so I think we've done a number of interesting things. So you look at kind of like I'll just give you some examples, a baseline inventory assessment of biological and cultural impacts of buffalo. And we partnered with the Intertribal Buffalo Council. You look at the characterization of bovine viral diarrhea virus, which is, a major issue in herds. So BVDV research. And the thing I'll throw in here is like our funding is going to establish baseline science. So these researchers can then say, we have a very compelling case here. Now I can go to the USDA or other .gov sources and apply for significantly larger grants. So let's say out of these projects we're talking about, and I'll go through some more, in the last probably 5 years, we've invested about $2 million. But when we were at the Center of Excellence for our strategic planning meeting this earlier in July, we found out that, basically those projects at $2 million has turned into, north of 25 million. So we're seeing those dollars have serious effect by establishing really relevant baseline science that has been compelling enough for USDA and other grants to invest, significant dollars to finish off or to further carry that research. So, other things that we've done, we've looked at like a comparison of ground nesting bee abundance and diversity between bison wallows. Pollinators are a major topic in our society today. Given, what's current modern farming practices and the chemical impact on those pollinators. And then, also drawing this comparison between, as I kind of said earlier, the larger ecosystem impact of a bison. So now something like that, and that was with like the USDA Research Center. We've benchmarked live animal carcass quality, outcomes at a slaughterhouse. So we know what that sort of looks like in the usage type thing. We have 10, 12, 14 really great ongoing research projects. It's highlighted on our webpage. Be patient. We're bringing some new flavor to that right now, where you're going to be able to see kind of a lay summary of of what the research was intended, a lay summary of what it's, has outlined for us, and then the guts of the paper where you could contact that researcher and get more information. So that's happening for us right now, but it's there for people to take a look at. And again, you could also go to the SDSU Bison Center of Excellence. They'll have a Google Scholar page right there where all that research, and it's such an awesome place because it's not South Dakota State University, only. It's what I'd say is a hub or a clearinghouse for people, institutions that are interested nationwide in bison. So it's a hub or a clearinghouse, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so as you're talking, the South Dakota State and these collaborations in general, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and this is going to feel probably like a weird question because, probably we both have a good understanding of this, but I want to give a broader overview for anybody who might be listening, about some of the collaborative work that the foundation does with organizations like, the North American Bison Discovery Center, and you've talked about the traveling exhibit, which has been great for us, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those collaborations, both with the Bison Center and just any other organizations that you're involved with.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together, right? We probably all heard that before. So our whole mantra is going to be about building and, maintaining partnerships, and by the way, all comers, we have this critter, this bison at the center of our, of our atmosphere, and we all have different interests and perspective in it, but for sure, like the Discovery Center, Thorelson Foundation, Turner, the National Bison Association, the state associations are critical, right? So one of the things I did when I first started here was I've reached out to as many of the state leads from their associations and say, hey, here we are. What do you need? What do you want? Nobody's got the market cornered on a good idea. So to say, how can the National Buffalo Foundation help what challenges you're experiencing in your geography? Because, and I don't want people, it's, the South Dakota SDSU Bison Center of Excellence isn't South Dakota focused. There's so much research that's happening that will be relevant. But maybe what's also is like, and this was really pretty apparent to me, I went to the NBA Eastern Conference down at the Lazy G Ranch in Tennessee, and just the conversation around the tables, about parasites and, pasture management, on a 300-acre parcel versus a 10,000-acre parcel, maybe in the Dakotas or Nebraska. So, it's also sort of advocating for what's geographically relevant. Now we don't affect what science gets picked to research. There's an independent board that does that. But for us to be able to go out and say, hey, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're, here's what the challenges are in these different geographies. Maybe there are things that we can do to bring, answers to the table or pose the question to researchers that are interested in X, Y, or Z.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great answer. What about young people? With education being a huge part of the foundation's work, what role do young people and kind of school age education play in building a future for Bison?
Well, first I'll say it's absolutely critical, like everything, right? I mean, just as our country is maturing, we're seeing more people move to the urban setting versus to the rural setting. Now maybe COVID was a little bit of a pushback where people said, given the ability to work remotely, I can live where I want and still do the job that provides for my family and my lifestyle. So, but I think young people need these connection opportunities, right? I think to be able to walk on the landscape, to hear the noises, to see the animal, to experience in every sense of the word the awesomeness of bison, right? And I can tell you the first time I really interacted with bison was on a road trip where we drove through. We didn't spend any time really, but drove through the Yellowstone for a day and was just totally consumed and fell in love with this animal, right? So the only thing the best adjective for me is awesome, right? That's the best adjective for me to describe bison is awesome. So for these young people to be able to experience that awesomeness, whether you're from, downtown, the suburbs, the rural community, it is an animal that when you are in its proximity is going to have an effect on you and make a lasting impression. So we have to help the community, and this is larger than the National Buffalo Foundation, but have to build pathways where these young people can get the opportunity to experience that. So I think in any way, shape, or form, I think one of the coolest things I've seen is at the Discovery Center, where they have that, sort of dissection of the bison, where you can actually lift the heart out of the replica heart, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is heavier than a bowling ball, right? Like that tactile, real perspective that says, this is really what we're dealing with. So, and then opportunities for young people to go out on the ranches, to go out to Antelope Island State Park and observe, and go to Custer State Park and observe, and although not easy to reach. But I think there's also, this ecotourism movement where families that are on summer road trips can experience, these animals in smaller bites, if you will, versus traveling to the Yellowstone or Glacier, Custer, or wherever that has bison, So I applaud, moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandpas and grandmas that are, hitting the road in the summer and then finding these, ecotourism opportunities to see what a bison ranch looks like, and thank you to the producers that are doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
but it's also, I think it's also a manifestation of knowing, if we want a bright future for bison, we have to allow people in. We have to welcome people, to let them get a chance to experience in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, candidly, the reason I got involved with the Bison Center is because I have a 5-year-old who just happens to be obsessed with them. I knew nothing about them, and until this, and I think there's a huge opportunity there to get the younger generation involved. Okay, so I'm gonna ask what's gonna feel like probably a very negative question, but then I'm gonna follow it up with a very positive one after that. So we'll
let me have it.
frame it that way.
Fire away.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing bison conservation today?
First is the lack of connectivity to the broader population. I think our job of everybody connected to bison is creating social relevancy, right? Why does it matter to, the soccer mom in LA, or the softball coach dad in Minneapolis? Why do these animals matter, right? But that's also to a larger, talking point that we discussed a little bit ago, is like our population is moving to urban centers, right? You're not seeing generations come back and take over the farm or the ranch. We're about to go through the largest transfer of land and wealth in our nation's history, and time and again we're seeing that story hit the end of the line on the family farm, right? So urbanization is a big challenge, right? I think expansion into these landscapes, right? Where buffalo can range on 10,000 acres, like development and things that are encroaching upon these wild spaces, these, undeveloped places is a big deal, right? The relevancy for keeping them on the landscape is going to be a challenge that we have to take on through education, through opportunity of experience, through promotion. Like the one thing I sit here and look at the National Buffalo Foundation, 4 or 5 months in, is like, we have got to tell a compelling story, right? So we're preaching to the choir with our constituents because they're bison connected. But how do we tell our story outside of that to bring people in, And I think the animal in and of itself is so inspiring. And like I said, again, awesome. So how do we let it do the talking for us in a way, right? But those to me are my two biggest things: the social relevancy, and the urbanization of our population, i.e., people aren't coming back out on the landscape to connect as we had in generations past.
So speaking to that, and you may have touched upon this a little bit already, but the positive spin to that is, what are some of the foundation's biggest priorities or specific initiatives for the next few years coming up here?
Yeah. It's great. It's a great question. I think there's going to be some evolution in that answer between today, next year and the future. But at the core of it is that research opportunity to keep healthy, sustainable herds on the landscape. So what can we provide financially to these researchers that are going to put tools and solutions and answers to questions and problems in the hands of people that are doing, God's work by keeping these animals on the landscape, right? So to me, that is absolutely, and to our board, that's absolutely priority one, mission critical, right? We are exploring other ideas, with like, scholarship type things that would, build a bridge to people coming into that, whether it's ag or conservation or research space, to get connected to bison, through the pathway at South Dakota State. So that's going to be an exciting thing that we're going to develop, and then really about telling the story to a greater population than just, our constituents that are raising bison or, producing bison or something like that. So, trying to tackle that relevancy, that exposure type challenge that I think we talked about in the last question. But so yeah, research, creating education opportunities that are meaningful and matter to, to people that will funnel that future pipeline of bison stewards, and then telling a story in a greater perspective for people that are, on those outer rings of looking in at bison, I guess.
If somebody's listening, well, obviously anybody who's listening to this is going to be somebody who cares about bison, but
Yeah.
if somebody's listening to this and they want to help, what are some meaningful ways that they can support the National Buffalo Foundation or get involved directly?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. For us, there's probably 4 really simple ways. One is the Bison Legacy Fund. So that's our annual fund. You can make a one-time donation. You could make a monthly reoccurring donation. I'd ask that as you're thinking about, donor advised funds or minimum distribution requirements that you're having to take as our population is aging. These are real challenges. It's funny, I just was having the same conversation with my mom and her financial advisor and about the church, right? So any way that those dollars could come to the Bison Legacy Fund. Right now we have the 250 for the 250th. We're trying to raise $250,000 for the 250th birthday of the United States. That'll go through the end of the year. We have the NBF Corporate Alliance Partnership. So if you own a business, we've got some great tiers we're building out basically awesome ways to promote that alliance and the brands that represent us. We have the Bison Stewardship Society that we're just launching, which is essentially our legacy society for people that want to incorporate the NBF in their estate planning. So a lot of ways to give. My contact information is all over the website. You can go to the website, click on the Donate Now button. You can, mail us a check. You can call me. I can help take payment. So, but the Bison Legacy Fund, the 250 for 250 campaign, the National Buffalo Foundation Corporate Alliance, and then our legacy, the Stewardship Society is our legacy society, would all be great ways for, for people to explore giving to the National Buffalo Foundation.
Awesome. Well, you have made it very easy for people to get involved. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I'll plug that in too when we upload this so folks can see it. So one more question for you, and obviously you're totally welcome to add anything you would like after this if there's anything you think I should have asked and did not. But I kind of want to end on a fun note. What is, and feel free to take your time answering this, if you had to pick, what is your favorite fun fact about Bison that you think more people should know?
Well, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but people are gonna be like, "Oh God!" But they're delicious, right? It's this great, clean, healthy food. And I'm a hunter, right? Like I have bird dogs, and we basically substitute grocery store meat with wild game, right? And we use it just like anything else, whether that's in tacos or chili or stir fry or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But I just think it is a delicious food, right? And super flexible. And I think, man, eat bison. It's super good for you. It tastes good. And it's kind of back to these, our roots, right? Where we're actually, you're knowing that your food is coming off the American landscape. You know that it's where you're procuring it from probably is your local producer, right? And you're contributing to, more bison on the landscape by creating this relevancy. This is a great way to be socially relevant, is saying, I want to feed myself and my family this delicious, clean food that's super nutritious, tastes good. And to me, that's one of the most awesome facts about bison is it's fantastic.
Well, you said it wasn't a fun fact, but I think it's very fun. But the downside is that it has now made me very hungry.
Yeah, right. I mean, and you know what? If you're a producer, I had ordered some bison and had people over. We had steaks. We grilled steaks, right? And they're like, "Oh my God, this is delicious," and it was, right. And I'm not patting myself on the back here, but it was. I cooked it well, and that's one thing is if you're going to share it with people, try to do your best to make it how it should be, right? We had my mom over for dinner. Last weekend we used ground bison for burgers, so it's super. Since I've been here and I've had it before, we ordered and eaten bison, but sharing that food, which is also very tied back into the hunting culture, is share that food with people and build that awareness, right? I don't know. It's just is cool. I think food is a great way to bring people together, at least in my opinion. And, they certainly show up in spades for that.
Yeah, well, it's a great way to build awareness, build community, which I think ties in really nicely to the work that the foundation and that you are doing. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that we should talk about today?
I think for me, it's just gratitude. New to this bison space, long time into the landscape and conservation space, but how welcoming people have been. So thank you very much. The people at the National Bison Association, the people at the Discovery Center. I was up at the Jamestown Bash, which was such a fun night, and it was a great night for that crew. I think it was super successful, but different ranchers, our board members have taken, a serious interest in helping me be successful here. And if I'm successful in this mission at the NBF, the trickle effect is that it's for the benefit of all people connected to Bison. So I just think, the openness, the ability to answer, or the opportunity to answer questions, like the patience that people have exhibited in, in my education of different things has been just phenomenal. So for me, it's just this message of gratitude, saying this is a community of people that is outstanding. This is a community of people that are doing, a higher purpose. And I just am really appreciative for them, and thank you for the things that are happening out on the landscape and with and for these animals.
Awesome. Well, and thank you for all of the work that you are doing and for coming on today. We were really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you. I will leave it at that, unless there's anything else you want to add about how folks can get in touch with you, if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, no, please. It's chad.bloom at nationalbuffalofoundation.org. And you'll post something like this after, right?
Yeah. I will, yes.
And my phone number is 320-292-4771. Call, text. I'm happy to answer questions about what we're doing. Happy to listen to ideas about what might make us better. But yeah, reach out, find out what we can do. Let's put our heads together and come up with the next thing that is going to help us, like I said, raise the tide for all these animals.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chad. You're a wealth of information, and we're very grateful to you for coming on today.
Thanks for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun, and I hope we generate some people that want to, connect at the center and with the National Buffalo Foundation.
Likewise. All right. Well, I will let you get back to your day. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.